I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube, Jules Sainz. I'm joined by my buddy Gordon Dabowski, my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to talk not just Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but how Dark Shadows took that and adapted it to create Adam. So, guys, the one thing I noticed in the book was we get a complete backstory of Victor Frankenstein. We don't get a complete backstory of Dr. Eric Lane, or even if you look at Dr. Julia Hoffman, who did ultimately bring Adam to life, we don't really get a complete backstory of her either. We do know more about her than Eric Lane. So I guess that's my first question. Why do you guys think they didn't do at least a complete backstory on one character or the other?
Because they're a soap opera, they're trying to get the content done on a daily basis, and quite frankly, their goal, I don't think they were trying to do a straightforward adaptation of Frankenstein. They were borrowing the stuff that they knew would work.
I think
not everyone.
If there had been some kind of plot-driven reason why, Lang's past would have been important over there, then yeah, they would have brought it up. But I don't think they ran into that. I mean, they tried to pretend that he was engaged to Lenora Eldridge or something like that. So they sort of make up a backstory, but that was it.
The one thing I noticed too is in the book how Frankenstein looks at the creatures like green, like it says greenish skin, I want to say, and he looks the skin because it's a dead people. What I noticed with Adam is we don't really, even though it's made from other parts. Yeah, awesome. It's made from other parts that he's made.
But it's all white meat chicken.
Yeah, that there's
and
not
meat glue. Don't forget the meat glue.
The skin isn't exactly green. Is that just another decision of, well, we don't need to make it green. We're not doing it exact like you guys are saying.
After the creatures shot the movie Mean Girls, his life took a very different turn, and that was the natural complexion that he had, just like Lindsay Lohan.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Joel, it's easy to get mixed. It's easy to get lost in the idea of, well, why didn't they do this from the novel? They weren't writing about Frankenstein. Like you'll notice, Joel, when you read the book, and I can say this with 100% certainty, there's no one named Collins in the entire book. There's no Barnabas. There's no Victoria Winters.
No, there isn't.
There is, however, a sequence involving machine guns. So, but yeah,
Noah Gifford inexplicably shows up at one point.
Right.
Just doesn't guest spot. Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, I think they were knowing that Dan Curtis was what they would call a monster kid. He grew up with the Universal Monsters. It's like, okay, you do Dracula. Barnabas Collins is Dracula.
What's the other big one?
Yeah, what's the other one? And you could do there's a couple of ways you could do it. You do what Doctor Who would do in a couple years in the future is do the Hammer Frankenstein. Only he's got a crab thing and he's they stick their head in the magic TV screen. But with this storyline, they're really trying to they're really going for the, okay, we know a vampire works. We know we've got time travel. What else can we do? Because I'm not sure of the order, but I know that I always think of the Dream Curse and the Adam storyline as, I'm not sure if one came together, but they feel very parallel.
Well, the Dream Curse was first,
right?
Because I think Angelique is trying to get to Eric Lane, trying to stop everything. Mm-hmm. By the time Adam was born, I think once Adam was born, the Dream Curse is done. Mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah, so they're trying to figure out, okay, the Dream Curse is kind of there. What can we do that isn't a monster? That isn't, but it's like, okay, since that's not quite working, you go into Adam.
Lang is pregnant with Adam during the Dream Curse. We'll say that. He's having
and the childbirth scene was just not pretty.
Adam Adam, when Adam's created, when Adam awakens, the dream curse isn't over yet. When Barnabas has his dream, Adam's still around, and they bury they they bury Barnabas or something because they don't want him to be like biting people or go back to the way he was. And Adam, they find, I think Willie or somebody finds Adam, or he's at the old house somewhat, and he's like suffocating. And it shows, wait, he's alive. He's not a vampire. So Adam's importance to the dream curse is very, very important because it lets you know that what Eric Lane said was correct. As long as Adam lives, Barnabas will not be a vampire. That's sort of the importance of the mix between the two.
Yeah, and that's a Corsican brothers thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a whole other sort of swashbuckling issue where one feels the pain of the other, and so on. Yeah, you know, it's funny to ask, why was Frankenstein as a concept scary? And I think, you know, for readers at the time, the idea of just the transgression of dealing with a corpse at all, which was not done certainly after Labor Day, was a big deal. And so I you know, a bigger deal than it is now, where you have, you know, medical procedural shows and whatever was at the Ryan's Super Bar the other day. So you know, that got audiences. The very sight of Karloff in the makeup as this kind of perversion of a human seen so vividly, I think, is something that got audiences.
Yeah.
But beyond that, and beyond whatever crazy stuff Peter Cushing was doing, because that's a totally different kind of fear than the Americans were getting out of it. That's just good old mad science weirdness. I think that by this era, Frankenstein was something that we appreciated out of ritual, sort of as horror fans, as good company men. But I'm not sure it really was a scary idea. And that was something I think Dark Shadows sort of got, you know, ran off the cliff and kept going in midair, thinking, oh, it's going to be as scary as Barnabas, and then kind of looked down and realized, oh, it's not. And that's true in the Mary Shelley novel also. I mean, you know, you spend all the time waiting for him to talk, and then he never shuts the hell up. You know, once he starts, he just yap. He nags and nags all the time. So you know, I think that's another thing where the writers might have dipped back into the Mary Shelley pool a little bit, but there's nothing there. So it becomes a very different philosophical story. It becomes about what's it like to be born? What's it like to want a companion? Which is the same stuff James Whale mined. And the you know, it takes the Whale material and it pushes it much further. You know, because here the situation is manipulated a little bit by Pretorius. But, you know, Pretorius is only there until the bride's created, and then they're all blown to atoms. In this case, Pretorius gets to keep, in the guise of Nicholas Blair, keep hammering home and taking advantage of Adam. And it's very sad. This is a very complex moral landscape on Dark Shadows. And I think maybe it's not the philosophical equal of what Mary Shelley was doing, but wow, is it complex? That's my Frankenstein stuff.
Well, I think where Adam stops being Frankenstein, really, because okay, Frankenstein does try to destroy his own creation, which when you look at Barnabas and Julia going after Adam, you can look at it as, well, Julia doesn't want necessarily Barnabas to kill him, but she doesn't do enough to stop him either. So Adam jumps off Widow's Hill, and after that, to me, you do have Adam taking Carolyn to the, what was it, a shack or something, and he keeps her there. I think there's a point in time it stops being Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and it starts being this whole other story of, okay, Adam is going to learn how to be a human being, and Adam does learn how to be a human being through many different teachers, somewhat through Barnabas, Professor Stokes, Nicholas Blair, and really ultimately what I love most about the Adam storyline is Adam learns, hey, I have to make my own decisions. And that's something I really love with Robert Rodin's character, most of all, because that's what I love most about the story. You could tell he does realize, okay, I do need to make my own decisions. I can't just have everybody be in my ear like a Jiminy Cricket, if you will. And that's what I love about the character most. But go ahead, Gordon. I'm sorry.
Well, I was about to say, I think part of the reason why Adam evolved in the way that he did was that the writers had to figure out, okay, how do we make something that isn't soap opera fit a soap opera? With Barnabas, he's a vampire, but how do you make a vampire fit? Well, you make him a reluctant vampire. You give him some semblance of humanity. With the Mary Shelley novel, I mean, first, the thing to keep in mind is the monster is not created through necessarily through like science. It's more alchemical because that was the science of the time. So they're the kind of, it's the 30s that gives us this idea of mad science. And by the time the 60s rolls around, it's like science is going to solve everything. But I think with Adam, you've got that approach of, okay, he starts as a solution to a problem. He is somebody else's solution. He is Barnabas's solution. But then the reason why they're making him human is to realize that he's not, he's not just there for Barnabas's sake. He is an independent being. Yeah. And it's like, there's to go on a really unusual tangent. There is an episode of Star Trek Enterprise where one of the characters is cloned because they need to harvest an organ for one of the characters. And the whole kind of emotional arc is, we created this person just to die so that they can give their organ. Is that necessarily right? And I think Dark Shadows was kind of hitting that kind of nerve of, this person was created to save Barnabas's life, but is that really fair? And they don't really, I mean, they do it very light-handed with, if Adam dies, Barnabas becomes a vampire. So there is that kind of sense of stakes, but,
which was never intended.
Right.
Adam was supposed to be just a host organism that, he was not supposed to really have an active brain. That he really was like, there are stem cell parallels.
Mm-hmm.
Just a cloned body, but not with any kind of active mind. Not until you stuck Jonathan Frid in there and then tacked on Roger Davis's face.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have been interesting?
Well, yeah. I mean, I have wondered what that would, because it'd be like that whole sequence in Our Majesty's Secret Service when George Baker is dubbing in the lines for George Lazenby. You'd have Adam Lang Collins, his cousin.
I do think that's something that's a big change in Dark Shadows, where they don't, because remember, Jonathan Frid's character is also making a choice, because he tells Dr. Eric Lane to let Roger Davis's character, Jeff Clark, go. And really, this is more of a humane choice by Barnabas, because to Barnabas, you could tell, well, if I make this choice of knowingly having Jeff Clark's face, I'm no better than Angelique herself. if I make this decision right here,
Oh, yeah.
that's it. The whole 1795 arc to build Barnabas as this good guy would have been utterly pointless. And the writers realized it.
Adam's life is bookended by two great moral awakenings by Barnabas. Yeah. The one where he's not going to cut off Jeff Clark's face. And he says, I've had it. Enough. Somebody has to say enough. And then when he does the right thing, he does the right thing with Jeff just because it's the right thing to do and to prevent suffering. He does the right thing at the end of it, even though it will mean his suffering.
Yeah.
And that's a big journey.
Yeah, the one thing he does too, he smashes the machine.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so they can't take Maggie's life force. So go ahead, George. I'm sorry.
No, I wasn't about to say anything.
Oh, sorry. I do like what they ultimately do with Robert Rodin's Adam, because though it starts off somewhat as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to a degree, they don't make it that exactly. They don't keep it that. They make it its own entity and its own thing, its own creation, its own character. And Robert Rodin does too. He doesn't get enough credit for portraying the character, because as a father, I can see teaching somebody who's just brought into the world as an adult, how to eat, how to act, how to properly speak. It's compelling. And then you have somebody who's a full-grown adult body not understanding, okay, why is this person like hitting me with a cane? That's something Adam didn't quite understand, because he was choking Willie.
Willie would say, pull up a chair.
And Willie was torturing him with here's the chicken.
The chicken leg.
Yeah, the chicken leg. Yeah.
On the chicken.
But it's really compelling television what they did with the character. What do you guys think?
Well, I think I know this is going to sound maybe a bit harsh and a bit cynical, but they really didn't have much of a choice, because with Barnabas, yes, they pulled from Dracula and vampire lore, but you could argue that they pulled from other sources. Maybe they're not as overt or they're not stated out loud, but they were at least moving forward with that. With 1795, they were pulling from a historical context. With Adam, if all they did was adapt the Mary Shelley novel, you end up at the end with Roger Collins and Willie leading a throng of they're carrying flaming frosted glass brandy snifters and chicken legs and trying to run Adam out. So they kind of realize, okay, we've got a character here. What can we do with this character? You can't make Robert Rodin is a naturally intelligent guy, so you can't make him stupid. You can't make him do the Karloff thing. But what you can do is go, okay, he's starting to develop his own identity. He's one of the few people who, it seems like the show, a lot of times people are defined by their pasts. And I think Adam's maybe one of the first characters, if not the first character, who realizes, hey, I am more than who I used to be, especially since he's basically a blank slate at this point.
Yeah, there's never any interest on Adam's part in terms of finding out whose face was this. Yeah. Whose brain was this? Do I have anything of it left? Some glimmer. Which I think is a very interesting storyline. I think probably if we were to have followed Adam after the character leaves the series, that might have been one of the kind of existential quests he would have gone on.
And I know of at least one fan fiction story that actually answers that question.
Really? In a Dark Shadows sense?
Yeah, it's in the World of Dark Shadows number 74.
Uh-huh.
It's a fanzine. It's a story called Revelations.
Yeah.
And I'll give either of you three guesses as to who wrote it.
Kathleen Resch.
Nope.
Warren
Mark
Odson.
Passmore.
Nope. I did.
Oh,
good
cool.
for you.
Cool.
So
Good job.
who is his owner? Who is his originator?
Well, he doesn't quite. There's no central identity. Basically, the story is he goes to Stokes and he's like, yeah, I need to know where I come from. He goes away from a while but comes back and they do the I Ching and the killer line is he says, "Hey, look, I'm made of dead men." And that realization just keep in mind I wrote this when I was in my 20s, so I wasn't quite the world wizened existential hero that you all know.
Was he horrified by this, or was he?
He was angry at
fascinated?
Barnabas because what he realized is that he didn't even really have a life of his own. Barnabas gave him part of a life.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's heavy stuff. Adams is a sad character.
Well, that's the thing too. He can't be mad at Dr. Eric Lane. He's dead. I mean, he can't confront him about it. Too. I mean, that's
But you know, at a certain point, you know, I think Adam has to ask, okay, well, I can't help the circumstances of my birth. Who am I now?
Yeah.
Because, you know, one of the things that I think so telling and touching and interesting about the text of Dark Shadows is that all these people are running around talking about how hideous Adam is. He's a very handsome man. He's got a few scars here and there. I've seen far worse. And so, you know, people are seeing what they want to see. And that's what Adam's being informed by. But this is a guy who came into the world, and the very first thing that happens is Julia Hoffman stabs him with a needle.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be in a bad mood too.
Can I give you a weird metaphor for DS? Do you think, like, and I don't think they were, but do you think the writers were, yeah, Adam's ugly on the outside, but he's just as ugly as some people's souls on the inside?
I don't know. I think Adam had a fairly tabula rasa soul. He seemed like an okay guy. Yeah.
No, I mean the other characters of like DS. Like, do you think, okay, they said he's ugly on the outside, but do you think like the way he looked sort of reflected some of the characters' souls in a way?
No.
Okay.
No, I think no. I think they reflected the values put together from dead men.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a patchwork man. And they knew that they, you know, the law of soap operas is that everyone has to be a heartthrob. So, you know, they couldn't put a big scar down the, you know, center of his face or whatever.
They did have, that's the thing though. He's gotta be a heartthrob. What cracks me up too, they have the dude jump off Widow's Hill. And he lives. And he looks real hideous after that.
You want splash piece?
I think actually, I mean, no, he doesn't look hideous. Evan Hanley, when he gets the hand, that's hideous. Adam's just had a rough night.
Yeah, Adam's just like a boxer, you know. It's the scars you would expect from surgery. Evan Hanley is what we would call a real triple bagger.
Yeah. That's a position in a grocery store, Joel.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any questions I forget. Okay, what's out of all the Adam art, what's something do you like that they actually took from the Shelley novel, and something you like that they didn't take from the Shelley novel?
Well, since they took almost nothing from the Shelley novel,
okay,
I would say yes to all of it. And I would say the idea of, you know, a guy on an existential quest for sort of who he is and what his meaning is. Sure, that's very, you know, Mary Shelley, and it's very Star Trek in a lot of ways. You know, Adam is a villain who turns out not to be a villain that they would run into on the original series.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that if you're watching Dark Shadows to compare it to like the actual Gothic novels that inspired it, you're kind of watching it and missing the point.
Yeah.
Because it's not about what it does with the source material. It's how it adds to the source material, how it kind of takes it and gives it its own spin.
And what that source material is like, if you are able to stretch it out that far and devote that much time to all the nuances and little eddies of the story. I mean, really, it's almost like the novels, no matter how long they feel, are almost Cliff's Notes compared to what Dark Shadows does. And I love that. They're repackaging it for modern times, but they're just taking the kernel of the idea. And it's that kernel of the idea that made it immortal. So they're kind of doing it a service. I mean, I once asked myself, would Dark Shadows get remade? And I said, well, yes, because it's just remaking other things, but not exactly, not note for note. That's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it didn't get remade note for note really in '91. I mean,
Yeah. And I mean, if we really want to get into it, you want to talk about what Dark Shadows has nothing to do with. It has nothing to do with Dracula.
Yeah, it's just the idea that it's not that, and back to my point, it's not like Dark Shadows said, okay, we're going to adapt Dracula. They kind of took that idea of the vampire, and I'm sure in Curtis's mind is, oh, we'll do Dracula, but it's not even the stage interpretation that was filmed of it's the vampire.
Yeah.
That's about the only Dracula thing they do.
Yeah.
And even then, he obeys totally different rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in the pantry.
I mean, Dracula in the novel has no lost love. He has no motivation to come to England at all and go to Carfax Abbey. It's a total non sequitur.
No, with Barnabas, the only thing that they say, he only says, I'm her cousin is he's from England. He says he's from England.
Dracula goes to England.
That's not.
And that's, I think that's stretching it. I mean, I think it's, I can say after last Saturday that Dan Curtis and Dracula are two names that should never be brought together.
Yeah.
And yet, it's funny, even though that movie's pretty lousy, he did contribute to the Dracula mythos, because now we always think of Dracula as having this lost love that he's after and so on and so forth, which, no, that's just Dark Shadows. And I do like that about it. It's not executed very well. It's a really amateurish movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
it is.
It's rough. It's real rough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting watch, I'll say. But maybe we'll cover it on the channel someday.
No.
What'd we do? I missed that. I was negotiating Italian food. What happened?
He was talking about how we're going to cover Fall of the House of Usher by Netflix, episode by episode.
No. I said maybe we'll cover Dan Curtis's Dracula someday.
You can cover Dan Curtis's Dracula.
I mean, I wrote a very funny piece for it for Bride of Monster Cereal. It's one of the funnier things I wrote. But I'll tell you, Jewel, if you want to talk about literary inspiration and Dark Shadows, the movie I really, really recommend is a movie called The Innocents, which is Turn of the Screw. And it's Turn of the Screw with one of the fabulous number twos in it as the ghost, Peter Wyngarde.
Yeah.
And it is considered one of the great atmospheric horror films of the 50s, 60s. Yeah. It's a very good movie. I directed an adaptation of Turn of the Screw by Jeffrey Hatcher that was really good. And so I had to live with that movie a lot just to help me figure out what was going on.
When I watch Dark Shadows, I know people say Dan Curtis got Victoria orders from Jane Eyre in a sense. Here's my thing. Have you ever seen The Uninvited? The original Uninvited?
All the time. But you're talking about the movie.
Yeah, I see more of that in Dark Shadows than anything else in a weird way. Because again, Dark Shadows, even in the beginning, is always mentioning ghosts. It's mentioning that Colin Burke Devil out of his own mouth. I went looking for ghosts in a house that he believed himself was haunted. It's like everyone keeps mentioning this house is haunted. I don't think they're necessarily taking House on Haunted Hill or even Hell House, if you will.
Well, I think with very early Dark Shadows, I think they were trying to pull less on any specific kind of vibe or even supernatural genre. And I think, the idea is if Gothic, as Patrick has suggested, is about decay, that the haunting is as much about the memories and the loss there than there is than in actual supernatural. In fact, when you look at that first series, even though it really doesn't pick up until episode 211, what you're seeing is, okay, now ghosts are actually appearing, which makes sense. And then the first kind of toe dip into the supernatural isn't Barnabas, it's Laura. And there are problems with that storyline, but I think they were smart to go to a mythological concept rather than like a classic horror concept, because then they could go, well, okay, it's a creature that
rules.
Yeah, they make up their own rules. And that was kind of where they realized, if Curtis's daughter hadn't said, hey, make it scary, throw in a vampire, someone at the writing staff would have said, you know what, there's something here. Let's just go all out and do a vampire. And then Dan Curtis would have clocked him with his golf club and, glared his teeth and,
Oh my god! I'm not so sure Dan Curtis would have clocked him with a golf club. Really? You really think he would?
I will.
He would have borrowed one from Forrest Tucker.
Yeah. When we're not recording, ask Patrick to tell you the John Milius story.
All right, I will when this is there anything you guys want to add before we go? God.
Now you make me feel like a natural woman, Jewel. That's all.
Gordon.
Let's see. I don't think I have anything more to add.
I will say this. I'll add this before we go. The Adam storyline with the Dream Curse is really, really good. It's psychologically good. The writers, the actors, all do a great job of selling both storylines. I love Robert Rodin's how he's acting the suffocation scene out when Barnabas is in the ground. Great stuff. Go check out the Adam arc if you haven't in Dark Shadows. It is worth it, God damn it.
Yeah, and it's proof that Dark Shadows jumped the shark with the 1897 storyline.
Links to Gordon Dabowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Link to Patrick McCrae's Dark Shadows Daybook About is going to be in the description box. I'm going to stop recording so Patrick can tell me a story.